Hello and welcome to Super Insider, a podcast on all things investing, superannuation and retirement, proudly brought to you by Australian Retirement Trust. I'm your host and my name is Anne Fuchs, and today we're talking about how much money you will need in retirement. Now with me is Joshua van Gestel, our Senior Manager of Education Delivery here at ARSH. Welcome, Josh.
And good to be back.
Yes, this is a very popular discussion point, but before we get into it, I just want to remind all our listeners and viewers that, of course, and you know this, but it is general advice and general information only, and you will need to decide if this information is right for you. Okay. Australia is obsessed with this particular subject.
Yes, they are.
How much money do you need in retirement?
It is the million-dollar question, isn't it?
And are you being a bit cheeky?
Yes, I fell right into that.
Okay, talk to me.
I think that we love grabbing the headlines and saying you need $1 million for retirement, or I think the most common question I get asked when I go around the country presenting to members and talking to members is, do I really need $1 million? And I'd like to actually say that the question is wrong.
Because in early 2025, Australian Retirement Trust did ask a lot of Australians what they thought their number was, and the average was $1 million. And I'm not sure if people just were pulling that number out of the air.
I have a feeling that they were, and I also have a feeling that it tends to be what we hear in the media a lot, that there is a lot of conversation often in the media about how much you need. And I think it's just a nice big number.
Okay, and we should call out too that there is, some of the peak bodies, one peak body within superannuation, ASFA says, it's about $600,000 is the number.
Yeah, and there are different organisations out there that talk about numbers that you need for a comfortable retirement.
Which is why people are so kind of interested in this, because they're confused.
Yeah.
They don't know what the number is.
So I think when it comes to ASFA, they say for a comfortable retirement as an individual, you'll need about $600,000. For a couple, you'll need probably a bit closer to $700,000. Now, that comfortable retirement is going to be your super. You're probably still going to be getting some money from the age pension. And although that gives you some direction, I think that the question people should be asking is, how much do I need based on my circumstances and my situation? And they're where the five rules are. Because
really, that number, if you think about the job you have, if you're working now, there isn't an average salary that you need to have because everyone's circumstances are different, and it's exactly the same in retirement.
That's exactly right.
So shall we go through the 5 ingredients or questions to work out your number?
The very first one is, I would suggest to you, at what age do you actually want to retire?
Do you have a number just yourself?
Myself.
Forgot?
An age I want?
Yeah.
I'd say 60 is looking great.
Yeah, 60 is a goal. Oh, look at you go, ambitious.
No, I would love to be in my studio painting.
Okay.
Anytime now.
Okay.
Would be good. No, I think for me personally, I'd love to be retiring in my early 60s if I could, or at least transitioning in some way in my early 60s.
And I do think that because of COVID phenomenon, people are seeking more balance and to live a larger life earlier and not be so consumed with work up until the very end. It's dialing back the hours and then having more time when you're younger to be able to live life fully.
And I think the other thing we see in research is very often people retire early, not because they want to, but because they're forced to. Either their body is shutting down on them,
their back is killing them.
And I think, to your point, we are seeing that people are actually going, you know what, I want to take a bit more control. But the first question is really, at what age do you maybe not want to retire, whether that's actually going to be realistic or not? It's maybe thinking about, when do you think you could retire? So once you've got an idea of that, and especially if you're in a couple as well, there's two of you've got to think about. If one person is very much younger than the other, are they going to go into retirement sooner?
A lot of couples retire together though.
Yeah. And so that's important to consider. And I don't want to be too generalistic, but often you will see that if there's a husband and wife, that it will be the wife that is younger, may already have a smaller super balance, there is going to be an impact if you make the decision to retire together and someone's younger. So the first thing is to really think about that age that you want to retire.
Okay, and then once you've worked out your number, so the age, we then go to the next step in the formula to work out your number.
And the next step is to actually think about, well, how long do you think your retirement will go?
I.e., how long will you be on this earth before you depart it?
Now, I actually was talking to my 11-year-old son about the mythical beast of the Cyclops, and I don't know if you knew about the Cyclops, but the Cyclops knew when they would die. We don't.
Are you actually making this up, or is this a thing?
I'm serious.
Okay.
It's a thing.
Good.
But why I raise that is we obviously don't know that. And so when it comes to you working out your number...
Well, it depends on your health circumstances, because some people do know when they're going to depart the earth.
But I would say for most of us that we'd have a pretty good idea based on our own health, based on life expectancy, based on our siblings.
Your grandparents and all of that.
We'd have a pretty rough idea. So in my case, I've got a father and a mother both in their 90s. I've got aunties and uncles well into their 90s. I pretty much should make the assumption that I'm going to have a very long life.
Yes.
So when it comes to my two retirement numbers, and when I think about that number of when do I want to retire, I've got to realise that I've got to fund a pretty long journey as well. So those are probably the two main goalposts you've got to think about in regard to your age.
Okay, then step number 3.
Step number 3 is where I actually think you then apply your own situation. Are you a couple or are you a single? And the reason why that's important, as you'd know, is if you're a single person, you're bearing all your costs yourself. So utilities, groceries, cost of living, all of that you're carrying yourself, and your savings have to fund that. If you're part of a couple, you can obviously pull that. And if you think back to the ASFA number that we talked about earlier, that a single person needs about 600,000, a couple, we're saying, only needs about 700,000 for a comfortable retirement. It's because they share those common costs that they don't need double the amount.
But it's more than that, I guess, too. Do you live on Magnetic Island up in beautiful North Queensland, or are you living in the at Cremorne in the lower North Shore, beautiful part of Sydney? And
that actually goes to number 4, to think about those needs and wants. Okay. And you are thinking around where your lifestyle is, what your expectations are.
Do you still have a mortgage?
Do you still have any debt, including a mortgage? And we're seeing a lot more people move into retirement with a mortgage or with carrying debt for their kids as well.
You may want to be downsizing.
Yep.
So in that, the needs and wants, it's really about what do you need in terms of a roof over your head?
Yep.
How much do you want to live life in terms of, are you happy with, Brizzy heading to the Broncos Leagues Club for a schnitty, or are you flying first class to Paris to see the opera?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that goes back to what we talked about right at the beginning. There is no magic number. The magic number is something that you individually have to really work.
And so this is why we would encourage people, as part of that step 4, to actually know what your budget is. You kind of need to know how much money you think you will need to live on, and would then work out. So there is your age that you want to retire.
Yep.
How long you think you're going to live for. What was the third one? I've gone blank.
And the third one is then thinking about your situation. So are you a couple or
that's
a single?
Right. Yes, okay. Then the needs and wants.
And then the needs and wants.
And then the 5th one
is bringing that all together.
And adding it up.
So when you want to think about, well, that's a lot for me to try and visualise or determine, that's where a lot of super funds like ART, we have retirement forecasters or calculators on our website that will ask you for some of those details that we've actually just outlined.
And then it'll give you a number.
And it will give you an idea as to not just what the number is, but allow you to think about, well, am I on track? And that's where step 5 is probably the most powerful, because I've seen, Anne, probably 2 things, and I've been privileged to actually educate people for about 15 years with art. I remember very clearly presenting at a factory in Adelaide where I was doing a seminar about retirement, and this lady came up to me at the end. She was in her early 70s crying. And I thought, oh God, my heart went out to her, but they were actually tears of happiness.
Oh.
She realised in that moment that she could actually retire. So a retirement forecaster or that tool actually gives you the ability to go, am I set up? Am I on track? Can I make this decision? Or do I actually need to do something?
And this is the thing. And you may need some simple advice or some more complex advice associated with that, because ultimately if the number that you get isn't a number that looks challenging for whatever reason, there are choices to be made about changing the age that you retire, how much you live on, the mix between the income account and the age pension.
And that's if Paris for the opera might be a bit of a stretch. It might actually be going to Broncos leagues. But
or QPAC here to the opera.
That's right. But it's also thinking about, is there actually things that I can do? Is there steps that I can take? As well as changing some of those numbers, do I change the way I'm invested? Do I look at putting extra money into my super where I can? How far out from retirement am I, and what am I able to do about it? So the sooner that you actually start to come up with that number, the better.
And Josh, the reality is there are a lot of people who probably are in the situation where they don't like the number, and that is just life. We know that the average 40-year-old, from research that we've done in the past, has about $90,000 where their balance really needs to be close to $150,000 to meet that as for comfortable standard. So there is a gap there. Let's call it a $50,000 gap for simplicity's sake. And so that's okay. That's fine. Let's do something about it. The earlier you can think about what that number is, the younger you are, the less sort of hard choices you need to make when you retire.
And that's what I often say, that as you get closer to retirement, working out that number, the levers you have to push and pull are, that's right. Whereas if you do it younger, it's smaller steps and smaller things that have a big impact. But the other thing I would say, Anne, is that I think a lot of people work out that number far too late. And even people come into their 50s, I'm there, I know you're not there yet, but people come into their 50s and I think almost go, do they bury their heads in the sand a bit because they think they've maybe lost the opportunity? I would actually challenge someone coming into their late 40s, into their early 50s, to really think about this, because that last 10, 15 years before retirement can be incredibly powerful.
Well, we know that if you're 51 and you get your cholesterol's too high, you've got a bit too much in terms of padding around you, and and what have you, there's not many Australians that would go, all right, well, I'll just accept that and put my head in the sand and do nothing about it. Most Australians I know would go, righto, I'm going to get on the cholesterol tablets, I'm going to do some walking, but we don't apply that same mindset to superannuation.
But do we actually go back to that opening comment? Is it because I'm seeing a headline that says I need $1 million? So that's where I think it is important we change the conversation. Say, you may not need $1 million, you need to work out your number. And then how do you get financially fit with your analogy to achieve that?
Yeah, because I'm just extending this health analogy, but there is no perfect weight.
Yep.
Because it depends on your height. There's all these, and if you can, for our listeners and viewers, that analogy of what's the right weight for you?
Yep.
It's the same and if someone said perfect weight is 65, most would just give up.
Yeah.
You go, well, I'm not bothering, which is what the $1 million number is doing to people.
Exactly right.
Yeah, okay. All right, well, so the 5 steps, let's just say them one more time. Boom, boom, boom.
So the goalposts, the age you want to aim for, or that's reasonable, how long you'll think you'll be in retirement, are you a single or part of a couple, what is your situation?
That's number 4.
Number 5 is then thinking about, well, how do I bring that together? So using something like a forecaster what am I aiming for, and then what can I actually think to do about it.
We hope it's been really helpful, this conversation, for our listeners and viewers, and that you take some action off the back of it, don't we, Josh?
We absolutely do.
Tell your family and friends, if you are a bit older and you have some young people in your life that you care and love and you want them to have a great retirement, give them a nudge and sit down with them with your iPad and get the calculator out and do it with them. Thank you so much for listening and viewing Super Insider. Subscribe, tell your family and friends, and we look forward to you joining us again soon.